Hi, Joe Cerrone.
And Al Rosen.
Welcome to our CAD 107 Introduction to 3D Printing weekly update. This is our Zoom classroom meeting number 5. We've introduced Project 5, which is our vase project. We have a lecture, which we'll start briefly. We have a video for how to 3D print the vase, and a video tutorial on how to draw the vase using AutoCAD. And this maps to our textbook, Project 12, how to model this vase. And we're basically going to model it using AutoCAD, and then we're going to print it using the Dremel slicing software. The PDF for the exercise file is right here. Last week, we recorded a video on our classroom meeting, and the assignments for project or for lab number 4 are right here. It's a chip clip. And then prior to the chip clip, we had our stationery holder. And that's working out really quite well. We just printed one of those for one of the students yesterday. It turned out really great. And we printed it. It's over in the lab. And then prior to that, we had our lab number 2, which was this do not disturb sign. And we also modeled that with 2 different CAD softwares. Okay. So with that, let's take a look at our lecture. I'm going to run the lecture. It's a PDF, and I'll just show you rather quickly. It's a PDF, and they open much quicker. Our topic will be 3D printer workflow in software. I'm going to run it from the PowerPoint file, so I'm going to open that. There we go. Okay, Introduction to 3D Printing, Joe Cerrone and Al Rosen. 3D printer workflow in software. And when we talk about the workflow in the software, and we look at what the author is talking about here, we're not able to just print like on a paper printer. It's more, he entitles it to following a recipe for cooking or baking a cake or something like that. Because when you print using the Dremel software, you have to have a number of the settings for that print for the part to come out correctly. It has to be the right temperature. You have to have the right material selected. And then you have a number of different things that you can set on that, like the quality of the print, the resolution, how it's affixed to the print palette. So there is quite a bit to actually working with these slicing softwares. 3D print workflow basically works like this. You have the design, the 3D CAD product, and we're using AutoCAD in this example for our next project, which is going to be a vase. And then you have our slicing software, which is, we're using the Dremel DigiSoft slicer. And then basically we run it, and we're able to now network our 3D printers with webcams, and we're almost to the point where we're able to print to the Dremel cloud. So as they look at this, for some people, what they talk about this is they look at the 3D printer as it's a tool chain. In other words, you have to have all 3 of these kind of in line to make this process work. Models, as we look at models, the first step in developing a 3D model of the design you want is done using CAD software. And there's a number of CAD softwares out there. We do a lot of AutoCAD because it's very popular in industry, and we do a lot of SolidWorks. Types of 3D printer files. We primarily work with STL files. As we create our CAD models, we'll export them to this STL file. It says it's old and inefficient. I know the new files by Microsoft are quite good, but we find that the STL files work just great. And we haven't had we haven't really used enough of it to compare it to the 3MF, which is the Microsoft file. And Microsoft is going big into this. They have the 3D Builder included in Windows 10, and they're looking at it as something that will be used quite a bit. As we start to work with these slicing files in these formats, it allows us to do things like use different colors and different materials for the properties. We'll also take a look at where can you get those files. And so if you're not going to design and build them like we do in the mechanical design CAD program, you can download them. And so one of the most popular sites is this site Thingyverse. And let me see if I can get there. And Thingyverse is an excellent place to get models. You can see somebody's got our pencil holder. So we're not the first to do that, but it's kind of neat. You don't even have to go down to the store. We used to, when I was a kid, buy these models and put them together. You can now print your own. And so they have a number of these Star Wars models out there. And they have a lot of other smaller things. Here's another stationary holder. Here's a gimbal for a camera. And they often put a lot of these new models into that area. So this is an excellent site to be able to download 3D printable models. And so, for example, if we wanted to download a pencil holder, we can get a number of these different holders. This is one I would like to print, something that can't be created any other way. This is very similar to what we were doing. And so if we were to click on, let's say this model, you're able to download these files and then open them up in the slicer. So it's a great source. There's no charge for it. And you're able to then see how some of these designers are. You're welcome to upload your files and then add your content. I think Al and I will start doing that next. All right, let's get back to our PowerPoint. So Thingyverse is an excellent site. You imagine Indestructibles, PinShape. There's quite a few different sites for these CAD models. Creative licensing. So there is some protection that you can get from these creative licenses of these files. You can copyright your parts and then be able to license people to print them. So if you have something that's a design that people can download and print and sell, you can sell the digital versions of them. Scanning is an area that we haven't got into yet. It's still quite a bit of work to be able to adjust the models, but we have used scanners, and this tip right here is a good example. We had a student who created an Xbox Kinetic scanner, and it was great. He was able to take it and scan in people's faces, actually. We'd have them sit in a chair, and then we'd spin the chair around, and then the scanner would take these pictures as it would move around and then stitch them together. So that's coming. That's an area that we feel is going to be something that we will be developing as we get into the modeling and prototyping area of 3D printing. The slicing software that we're going to be using is this Dremel Digi 3D Slicer software, and most of you should have downloaded it by now. We're working on developing the wireless printing from the Dremel Print Cloud, which will allow us to print remotely. And so you'll be able to, theoretically at this point, print to a 3D printer from home. And so that would be the goal. And it's very workable. We just need a little time to figure out the development aspect of it. But you're welcome to look at that. It's on the Dremel site. As we talk about slicing in 3D printing, think of the slicer software as the engine that creates the tool path for the 3D printer. And they liken it to CAM software or computer-aided manufacturing, like a program like Mastercam, because it generates G codes, which are the same codes that run the CNC machines. And so as we look at these different programs, like our Dremel software, let's take a look at that. So here's an example of our Dremel software, and we have our vase in the build area. The way that I have this set up is I have it networked to the camera, and so I'm able to demonstrate this part. I can actually, it's right next to me, can actually open it, put my hand in here, take the part off if I wanted to. Can jog our palette and our print head. And we'll start to do more demonstrations on how that works. And so the Dremel printers are networkable, and they're also tied to the slicing software, which allows us to network print them. And what we're doing in this video, or talking about in this video, is how to set that up. And so we have the ability to choose our material. And so we can choose a Dremel material. We have this set up right now for PLA. And then once we have that, we can dial in the resolution of the printer. And this is how fine the plastic is laid onto the model. And then there's a number of other settings as we start to go through and work with this. And we will start to cover those in the next video. And so we'll go through the first half of chapter 3 in our Introduction to 3D Printing and Prototyping textbook. And then we'll go into more of the specifics that we talk about, like being able to shell it, being able to work with things like infill, being able to work with support material. And in this example, we're working with a special mode called Spiralize Outer Contour. And what that does, if we hold cursor over it, there we go. What the Spiralize Outer Contour does is it creates just one wall, and then it builds that model. And so it prints a model like this very quickly. If I were to slice it, I can slice it and then go to these view options, and you can see how the build is. And then I can zoom in and I can watch layer by layer how that model is printed. And this is a fairly simple model. It doesn't have any support material. It does have what's called a brim, which helps affix it to the palette. And so this model takes 489 layers. There's some other really kind of neat things that we figured out how to do with it. So for example, we can come into the part and we can actually scale it. So let's say you wanted something that was kind of wide. Whoops. I don't want it to be uniform scaling, that's why. And so if I wanted to bump that up 75, let's say 100. Something drastic. It's a little too drastic. And it looks like I can't quite fit it on the palette if I do that much. And then we can also adjust some of these other settings. So for example, in the x-axis, I could say 75 as well. And then we can slice it. And you can get some variations on your model as we start to work with it. So there's some really neat things we can do in the control functions of the slicing software. And then we can see how that build will be simulated within the slicer. And then we can download it and print it directly and view the progress on our 3D printer through the webcam. So the software is a very big part of how we work with the 3D printers. And this Dremel 3D printing software will be what we'll be using. And so in our video, we'll go through how to use the slicing software and how that works as far as what I just demonstrated, like with the spiralized outer contour aspect. And then we use that software to simulate our prints. And so we have a good idea of what it's going to look like. We can see how long it's going to take. And you can look for possible problems with 3D printing. And we'll start to go into that in later chapters. We have a video on slicing in 3D printing for our vase project. This is the YouTube location for it. I'm not sure why it doesn't want to link. And so here's our video of how to create the vase and how to slice that. We create the vase in AutoCAD and we have instructions on how to do that and then how to bring it into the slicer. And then we actually go through and prototype it in this video, which demonstrates a number of the different aspects of it. All right. So that's the end of our lecture for chapter 3.